The private dining room at Lou Bernardine hummed with the quiet elegance of expensive conversation and crystal clinking against fine china. Mom's 65th birthday celebration was in full swing, with 24 family members gathered around the mahogany table that cost more per seat than most people's monthly rent. I sat at the far end, methodically cutting my Dover sole while half listening to the familiar soundtrack of family success stories. My sister Rebecca regaled the table with tales from her latest art exhibition in Soho. My brother Marcus described his newest client, a tech billionaire who'd hired his architectural firm to design a compound in Malibu. And the commission alone, Marcus was saying, gesturing with his wine glass, will fund both kids' college tuitions at Harvard. Appreciative murmurs circled the table. Uncle Richard raised his glass in a toast to Marcus's continued success. Aunt Patricia beamed with family pride. "What about you, Natalie?" my cousin Jennifer asked from across the table. "Any exciting projects at the... Where do you work again?" All eyes turned to me. "Here we go. I work in tech consulting," I said quietly, taking another bite of fish. "Right, tech consulting," Rebecca repeated with that particular tone that made it sound like I'd said, professional couch sitting. "Still working from that little apartment, still driving that ancient Camry. Some people are just built for modest lives," Mom added, not unkindly, but with the resigned tone of someone who'd accepted a disappointing reality. "Not everyone can achieve great things." I kept eating, focusing on the perfectly prepared fish while my family discussed my limitations as if I weren't sitting 3 feet away. "The important thing," Dad said diplomatically, "is that Natalie is employed and independent. Not everyone needs to be a high achiever." "True," agreed Uncle Richard. "Someone has to do the ordinary jobs. It's nothing to be ashamed of." What they didn't know was that my ordinary job involved running Aurora Technologies, a cybersecurity firm that protected the digital infrastructure of 17 Fortune 500 companies, 12 government agencies, and the entire financial network of 3 small countries. We'd been acquired by Microsoft 18 months ago for $3.7 billion, though I'd retained controlling interest and continued as CEO. But to my family, I was Natalie who worked with computers, and lived in a tiny apartment, and drove an embarrassing car. They'd never asked for specifics about my work, preferring their assumption that I was the family's modest underachiever. "The point is," Mom continued, warming to her favorite topic, "success runs in families. Look at Rebecca's art career, Marcus's architectural firm, Jennifer's medical practice. Success is genetic." "What about Natalie?" Jennifer asked innocently. Mom sighed dramatically. "Well, not everyone gets the success genes. Some people are just different." "Different how?" I asked quietly. "Oh, honey." Mom's voice carried that patient tone reserved for explaining obvious things to slow children. "You're 33 years old. You live in a studio apartment, drive a 15-year-old car, and work at some little computer company nobody's ever heard of." "I've never heard of your company," Rebecca added helpfully. "What's it called again?" "Aurora Technologies." "See? Nobody knows it. If it were important, we'd have heard of it." Marcus nodded sagely. "The really successful tech companies are household names. Microsoft, Google, Apple. If your company mattered, it would be famous." The irony was perfect. Microsoft had acquired us specifically because our cybersecurity innovations were too valuable to remain independent. Our technology protected their cloud infrastructure and powered their enterprise security division. "The truth is," Mom continued, her voice gaining the authority of someone delivering an uncomfortable but necessary truth, "some people are just born to be followers, not leaders. There's nothing wrong with being ordinary, Natalie. Not everyone can be special. You'll never amount to anything," she declared with the finality of a medical diagnosis. "And that's okay. The world needs regular people too." My sister nodded vigorously. "Some people are just born failures. It's not personal, it's just genetics. Mom and Dad had 2 successful kids and one normal one." I stayed quiet and kept eating my fish, letting their words wash over me like familiar background noise. This conversation happened at every family gathering with minor variations but the same central theme. I was the family disappointment who'd somehow failed to inherit the success genes. What made it particularly amusing was that I'd been supporting several of their successful ventures for years without their knowledge. Rebecca's Soho gallery stayed afloat because I'd purchased most of her inventory through shell companies, then donated the pieces to museums for tax write-offs. Marcus's architectural firm had exactly one major client, a real estate development company I owned through a subsidiary. I'd learned early on that my family preferred me unsuccessful. When I tried to share my actual achievements, they dismissed them as exaggerations or misunderstandings. So I'd stopped trying and let them maintain their comfortable fiction. The thing about failure, Uncle Richard was saying, is that it's usually apparent early on. Some children show promise, others show limitations. Natalie always struggled with ambition, Mom agreed. Even as a child, she was content with mediocrity. Actually, as a child, I'd been content with learning. While my siblings focused on social success and family approval, I'd been teaching myself programming languages and building computers from spare parts. By 16, I was freelancing as a security consultant for local businesses. By 21, I'd founded Aurora Technologies in my dorm room. I think Natalie does her best, Aunt Patricia said kindly. Not everyone can be exceptional. Exactly, Mom beamed. We love Natalie just as she is, ordinary, struggling but trying hard. I was about to respond when our waiter, Thomas, approached the table carrying a cordless phone. Excuse me, he said politely, Miss Thompson? There's an urgent call for you. The table fell silent. Everyone stared as Thomas handed me the phone. Miss Thompson? There's an urgent call from Forbes magazine, Thomas announced clearly. I could have corrected him, told him to take a message, explained that business calls could wait until after dinner. Instead, I accepted the phone. This is Natalie Thompson. Miss Thompson, this is Sarah Williams from Forbes. I apologize for interrupting your evening, but we have a deadline situation with tomorrow's cover story. The entire table was listening now, forks suspended mid-air. What can I help you with? I asked. We need final approval on the headline for your feature. The editorial board is split between The Quiet Revolutionary, How Aurora Technologies CEO Built a Cybersecurity Empire, and From Dorm Room to $3.7 billion, The Natalie Thompson Story. Which do you prefer? 24 family members sat frozen, staring at me. Either headline is fine, I said calmly. You have editorial discretion. Perfect. And just to confirm, you're comfortable with us revealing your net worth? Our research shows approximately $2.4 billion after the Microsoft acquisition. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. That's accurate, I confirmed. Excellent. The photographer will meet you at Aurora's headquarters tomorrow at 9 a.m. for the cover shoot. Thank you for your time, Miss Thompson. I handed the phone back to Thomas, who disappeared discreetly. The silence around the table was absolute. Forbes. Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. Cover story? Marcus added weakly. $2.4 billion? Mom's face had gone completely white. I returned to my fish, cutting another precise bite. Natalie, Dad's voice shook slightly. What was that phone call about? Forbes is running a cover story about Aurora Technologies tomorrow. They needed approval on the headline. But you said you work for some little computer company, Jennifer protested. I said I work in tech consulting. Aurora Technologies is a cybersecurity consulting firm. But, Mom struggled to form words. But you live in a tiny apartment. I live in a penthouse. It's just not flashy. Your car is a Toyota Camry because I prefer reliable transportation over status symbols. The Forbes person said $2.4 billion. Uncle Richard said slowly. My net worth after Microsoft acquired Aurora for $3.7 billion. I retained 65% ownership. Microsoft acquired your company? Marcus's voice cracked. 18 months ago. We now power their enterprise cybersecurity division. Rebecca stared at me. You own part of Microsoft. I own Aurora Technologies, which is now a Microsoft subsidiary. So technically, yes. But you never said. Mom started. I tried to tell you. Remember 3 years ago when I offered to help Marcus expand his firm? You said I didn't understand business. Remember when I suggested Rebecca consider international markets? You said I was being unrealistic about the art world. The table was still completely silent. Every time I tried to share my work, you dismissed it as the naive suggestions of someone who didn't understand real success. So I stopped trying. But if you're successful, Jennifer asked weakly, why do you act like you're not? I don't act like I'm not successful. You assume I'm not successful because I don't display wealth the way you expect wealthy people to display it. You dress normally, Aunt Patricia observed. I dress professionally. These clothes cost more than most people's monthly salary, but they're not designed to broadcast their price. Your apartment is a 4,000 square foot penthouse with a view of Central Park. It's just not decorated like a magazine spread. Why? Mom's voice was very small. Because I prefer substance over appearance. Because my work is more important than my image. Because I've learned that the people who matter don't judge success by surface displays. Dad cleared his throat. Natalie, when you say you own part of Microsoft, Aurora Technologies generates about $400 million annually in revenue for Microsoft's cybersecurity division. We protect the digital infrastructure for most major corporations and several government agencies. Government agencies? Uncle Richard leaned forward. Pentagon, NSA, Treasury Department, among others. We also handle cybersecurity for the financial networks of Canada, Ireland, and Singapore. You protect countries? Rebecca's voice was odd. We protect the digital systems that countries depend on. Banking networks, power grids, communication systems. Natalie, Mom whispered, are you telling us I'm telling you that your assumptions about my life have been wrong for about 12 years. 12 years. I founded Aurora when I was 21. We've been profitable since year 2. Marcus put down his wine glass with shaking hands. When you offered to help expand my firm, I was offering to invest about $10 million in your growth. The computer person you thought didn't understand business was offering to fund your expansion because I believed in your architectural vision. 10 million, he repeated weakly. It seemed like a reasonable investment in family. And when you suggested I consider international markets? Rebecca asked. I was offering to introduce you to gallery owners in London, Paris, and Tokyo who I've worked with through Aurora's international clients. I thought your art deserved a global audience. You know gallery owners in Paris? I know people in most major cities. Aurora has offices on every continent. The waiter appeared to clear our plates, moving efficiently around the table of stunned diners. Natalie, Dad said slowly, I think we owe you an apology. For what? For everything. For assuming you were unsuccessful. For treating you like you needed our pity. For dismissing your ideas. You don't owe me an apology for your assumptions. You owe me an apology for never showing enough interest to learn the truth. That's fair, Mom said quietly. For 12 years, you've talked about me like I was the family failure without ever asking what I actually do for work. You've made jokes about my apartment without visiting it. You've criticized my car without understanding my priorities. We should have asked, Jennifer admitted. Yes, you should have. But more importantly, you should have treated me with respect regardless of my level of success. What do you mean? Mom asked. I mean that even if I had been struggling financially, even if I had been living in a tiny apartment and working an ordinary job, I still would have deserved your respect as a family member. The weight of that statement settled over the table. You're right, Dad said quietly. We treated you badly because we thought you were unsuccessful. That says something terrible about us as people. It says you measure worth by financial achievement instead of character. We do, Rebecca admitted. And that's awful. It's human, I said more gently. But it's also changeable. How do we change? Mom asked. By getting to know me as I actually am instead of as you assumed I was. Tell us, Dad said earnestly. Tell us about your work, your life, your achievements. We want to understand. So I told them. About building Aurora from nothing into one of the world's most trusted cybersecurity firms. About the satisfaction of protecting critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. About the international team of brilliant programmers and security experts I'd assembled. I told them about the quiet fulfillment of solving problems that kept countries safe, businesses operational and financial systems stable. About choosing substance over flash, impact over image. As I talked, I watched my family's expressions change from shock to awe to something that looked like respect. Natalie, Mom said when I finished, I'm proud of you. But I'm also ashamed of myself. Why ashamed? Because I've been proud of Rebecca for selling paintings to wealthy people and proud of Marcus for designing houses for celebrities, but I dismissed you for work that actually matters to the world. All work matters if it's done with integrity. But some work matters more than others, Dad said. And yours matters a lot. What matters most is that we're family. Success doesn't change that. But respect does, Rebecca said quietly. I haven't been treating you with respect and I'm sorry. I'm sorry too, Marcus added. When you offered to help my firm, I should have listened instead of dismissing you. Over dessert, the conversation shifted to genuine curiosity about my work and life. They asked thoughtful questions about cybersecurity, international business, and managing a company with global reach. But the most meaningful moment came when Mom pulled me aside as we were leaving. Natalie, I have a confession. What's that? Even when I thought you were struggling, I was proud of you. You've always been kind, intelligent, and principled. But I was also worried about your future. And now I realize that your character was exactly what made you successful. You didn't build a company to get rich. You built it to solve important problems. The wealth followed because you created real value. That's exactly right. I also realize that I've been a terrible mother for the past 12 years. You haven't been terrible. You've been human. I've been judgmental and dismissive. And now you know better. That's what matters. As we waited for our cars, the family dynamics had already begun to shift. Instead of talking around me, they were talking with me. Instead of making assumptions, they were asking questions. Natalie, Marcus said as his Tesla arrived, would you be willing to have lunch next week? I'd love to hear your thoughts on some business expansion ideas. I'd like that. And I'd love to see your penthouse, Rebecca added. If you're comfortable having visitors. You're welcome anytime. 6 months later, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner at my actual home, the penthouse my family now knew I owned. The conversation around the table was completely different from previous family gatherings. Instead of success being a competition, it had become a collaboration. Marcus and I had partnered on a sustainable housing project that combined his architectural expertise with my technology resources. Rebecca was preparing for her first international exhibition, with introductions I'd facilitated to galleries in major cities. Most importantly, we had learned to be a family based on respect rather than assumptions, support rather than judgment. Natalie, Mom said over dessert, I have something to tell you. What's that? I've been bragging about you to everyone I meet. The woman at the grocery store, our neighbors, the people at church. You don't need to brag about me. I know I don't need to. I want to. For 12 years, I missed opportunities to be proud of my daughter because I was too blind to see who she really was. You see me now. That's what matters. I also want to apologize again for that birthday dinner. Mom, you've already apologized. I know, but I keep thinking about what I said. You'll never amount to anything. It was such a cruel thing to say. It was inaccurate, I said with a smile. But it wasn't cruel. You genuinely believed it based on the information you had. Information I never bothered to verify. True. But you know better now. Dad raised his glass for a toast. To Natalie, who taught us that success isn't always visible, family love should never be conditional, and some of the most important work in the world is done by people who prefer substance over show. To family, I countered, who learns to see each other clearly. To second chances, Mom added. To asking better questions, Marcus said. To looking past assumptions, Rebecca finished. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely celebrated by my family, not for my wealth, but for who I was as a person. The greatest victory wasn't proving them wrong about my success. It was teaching them that love and respect shouldn't depend on financial achievement, and that the most valuable family relationships are built on genuine curiosity about each other's lives rather than comfortable assumptions about each other's limitations. Sometimes the best revenge isn't showing people how wrong they were about your failures. Sometimes it's showing them how wrong they were about what success looks like, and helping them become the kind of family where everyone's achievements can be celebrated without anyone having to fail for others to feel valuable. The Forbes cover story had been the catalyst, but the real transformation happened around family dinner tables, in honest conversations, and in the daily choice to see each other with fresh eyes instead of old assumptions.